Welcome to my channel Shadows of History. She was what they made her. Nobody remembered exactly when Copper Bend stopped being a mining camp and started being something closer to a wound in the earth. A place where men came to extract things and stayed to lose themselves, where whiskey was cheaper than water and the graves outnumbered the buildings worth naming. It was not a place for children. Tess Calder had never really been one. Her mother died when Tess was 6. A fever, then a silence, then a mound of red dirt at the edge of camp that nobody maintained after the first season. Her father lasted 2 more winters, a gambler whose debts grew faster than his winnings, until one January morning he simply wasn't there anymore. No goodbye. No note. No explanation that could have helped anyway. The town looked at the 8-year-old girl he left behind and waited for the inevitable. She would beg. She would starve. She would disappear the way that children disappeared in places like Copper Bend. Quietly, completely, in ways that nobody investigated too carefully. Tess did none of those things. She found her father's tools in the freight wagon behind the saloon where he'd stored them against a debt he never paid. She taught herself to mend boots from watching the Cobbler 2 camps over. She sharpened knives for cowboys who barely glanced at her, charged them fairly, and remembered every face that tried to shortchange her. She slept in the freight wagon with the door braced shut and a hammer within reach, and when drunk men came around wanting her gone from what they considered their territory, she made it clear, without words, without tears, with nothing but the flat patience of someone who had already survived the thing they were threatening, that gone was not something she was prepared to become. She was 10 years old. By then she had already learned the first and most important lesson Copper Bend had to teach. Softness was a resource you could not afford to spend. The ore bosses learned about her the way powerful men always learn about someone they've underestimated. Slowly, then all at once. They controlled everything in Copper Bend worth controlling. Wages, bunkhouses, storage yards, the flow of work and money through the camp. They had arrangements with everyone, and everyone honored those arrangements, because the alternative to honoring them was ugly and permanent. They wanted Tess gone. At first they were subtle about it. Her ropes went missing. Her work orders disappeared. Her tools were scattered across the yard in the night, covered in mud, some of them broken. She gathered them without expression, cleaned them, repaired what could be repaired, and kept working. Then the warnings arrived, the language of men who wanted fear without fingerprints. A crushed coin on her doorstep. A boot print pressed deliberately into the mud by her wagon door. Then a knife driven into the wood beside the latch, deep enough that she needed both hands to pull it free. She pulled it free, sharpened it, added it to her collection. She did not break. She did not beg. She sharpened her resolve the way she sharpened everything. Methodically, without hurry, without a single visible flicker of fear. She was waiting too. She just didn't know yet what she was waiting for. It came on a night in late autumn when the temperature had dropped and the camp was loud with men trying to drink away the cold. Tess heard it before she saw it. The particular sound of something being dragged, of muffled protest, of the kind of violence that tries to be quiet. She took her hammer and stepped into the lamplight behind the mill. 2 of the ore boss's men had a teenage boy by the arms. He owed money. The kind of debt that, in Copper Bend, was designed never to be fully repaid, structured to keep a person permanently obligated and therefore permanently controllable. They were dragging him toward the darkness beyond the mill, the kind of darkness where things happened that the camp collectively agreed not to notice. Tess stepped into the light and held the hammer at her side. One man looked at her and almost laughed. Almost. Walk away, girl. This has nothing to do with you. Tess looked at the boy. She looked at the men. She looked at the hammer in her hand and thought about every coin left crushed on her doorstep, every rope cut, every night she'd slept with a brace against the door listening to men outside deciding whether she was worth the trouble. You don't want to do this, the man said, and this time there was less almost in his voice. She looked at him with eyes that had been doing the arithmetic of survival since she was 6 years old. No, she said. I'm what you made me. What happened next? Copper Bend never told the same way twice. Some said the men tripped. Some said the boy found something in himself he hadn't known was there. Some said Tess moved first and fast and with 10 years of accumulated fury driving every motion, that she swung the hammer not in rage but in cold, geometric precision, The way you swing a tool you have used 10,000 times and know exactly how to make do exactly what you need. When the dust settled, both men were on the ground. Broken. Crawling. Making sounds that nobody in the camp would claim to have heard. Tess hauled the boy to the freight wagon, shoved him inside, dropped the brace across the door, and walked straight into the center of town. Her hands were bloodied. Her face was completely still. Every person who saw her go silent. Not one of them spoke. That was the night Copper Bend understood what it had made. The ore bosses raged. They called meetings. They talked about what needed to happen to a girl who had put 2 of their men on the ground. They talked about making examples. Nobody volunteered to go near the freight wagon. Nobody wanted to be the one to walk into the yard she had claimed as her own and find out what came next. By the time she turned 12, they had stopped sending people. By 14, the miners were coming to her instead. With disputes, with problems, with things they needed handled quietly by someone they trusted not to be owned by anyone. By 15, travelers passing through camp brought stories of Copper Bend back to other camps. That the place had a kind of guardian, a girl with a hammer and eyes like spent bullet casings, who had survived everything the camp had tried to do to her and come out the other side of it harder than the ore they were pulling from the earth. At 17, she was gone. No goodbye. No note. No explanation. Just a freight wagon standing empty behind the saloon, a sharpened hammer hanging on a nail beside the door, and the question mark of a life that had started as a tragedy and become something the Old West didn't quite have a word for. They still tell her story in Copper Bend, the way you tell the stories of places that shaped you before you understood what shaping cost. Always the same ending. Always the same 3 lines, spoken like the close of a prayer. She never surrendered. She never softened. And she didn't forgive a single soul who tried to decide her fate.